Hi guys, in the soft stillness of an early morning, long before the sun has fully risen, the land beside the Nile rests in a gentle silence. The air is cool, almost tender. A faint mist drifts low over the water, moving slowly, as if it has nowhere urgent to be. The river itself flows without effort. It does not rush. It does not speak loudly. It simply moves forward, the same way it has always moved, through time that feels endless. Along its banks, the earth is dark and soft. It holds the memory of water. When touched, it yields easily, rich with life. This narrow ribbon of fertile land stretches quietly between the pale, dry desert on either side. The desert waits, still and wide, its sand faintly glowing under the first hints of light. And here, in this small space between water and desert, life has been unfolding for thousands of years. A village begins to wake. There are no loud sounds. No sudden movement. Only the quiet rhythm of daily life, beginning again as it did yesterday, and the day before, and many years before that. A door made of simple wood creaks open. A woman steps out into the morning. Her feet touch the cool ground, and she pauses for a moment, breathing in the calm air. She carries a clay jar, smooth and worn from years of use. Without hurry, she walks toward the river. The path she follows is narrow and familiar. It has been shaped by many feet over time, feet that walk the same way, at the same hour, carrying the same quiet purpose. The village itself is made of mud brick homes. Their walls are thick, keeping the heat out during the long, warm days. Their surfaces are soft in color, blending with the earth around them. Some are patched and repaired, showing the marks of careful hands and passing seasons. The roofs are flat. Sometimes, they are used for resting in the evening, when the air cools again and the sky grows wide with stars. There is no rush here. Time does not feel sharp or pressing. It moves slowly, like the river. Each moment stretches gently into the next. From another home, a faint sound of movement. A child stirs, turning under a simple woven covering. The child does not wake all at once. Sleep fades slowly, like the night itself. Nearby, a man sits just outside his doorway. He has risen early. His hands rest quietly in his lap. He looks out toward the fields, though they are still dim in the early light. He does not speak. He simply sits, breathing, waiting for the day to fully arrive. The village is small. It does not spread far. A few winding paths connect the homes. There are no straight lines, no sharp edges. Everything feels shaped by use, by time, by the quiet decisions of many lives lived simply. Beyond the homes, the fields begin. These fields are narrow and carefully tended. They lie close to the river, where the soil remains moist and fertile. Small irrigation channels carry water gently across the land, guided by low ridges of earth shaped by human hands. The water does not rush here either. It moves slowly, filling each space, soaking into the soil, giving life without urgency. In these fields, crops grow in quiet rows. Barley, emmer wheat, flax. Each plant rises from the dark soil, reaching upward, steady and patient. There is no hurry in their growth. They follow the rhythm of the seasons, the rise and fall of the river, the warmth of the sun. The people of the village understand this rhythm deeply. They do not try to change it. They move with it. As the sky begins to lighten, the colors shift softly. Pale blue spreads across the horizon. A faint gold touches the edges of the land. Birds begin to stir. Their calls are gentle at first, soft notes carried through the still air. They move between the reeds near the water, their wings brushing lightly against the surface of the river. The woman reaches the riverbank. She kneels slowly, placing the clay jar beside her. The water is cool. She dips the jar carefully, allowing it to fill without splashing. The movement is practiced, calm, repeated many times before. For a moment, she pauses. Her hand rests on the surface of the water. The river flows past her fingers, constant, unchanging in its purpose. This river is everything. It gives water. It gives fertile soil. It gives life. Without it, the village would not exist. Without it, the land would be silent and empty, like the desert beyond. She lifts the jar. It is heavy now, but she carries it without strain. Her body knows this weight. It has carried it many times. She stands, turning slowly, and begins the walk back. Behind her, the river continues to flow. Unconcerned. Unhurried. Endless. Back in the village, more people begin to wake. A soft murmur of voices rises, low and steady. It is not loud. It does not disturb the calm. It blends into the morning, becoming part of it. A small fire is lit. The smoke rises gently into the air, thin and pale. It carries a faint scent of burning wood, a smell that lingers in the village, familiar and comforting. Grain is ground using a simple stone tool. The motion is slow and rhythmic. Back and forth. Back and forth. The sound is soft, almost like a whisper against the quiet morning. This is how bread begins. Not quickly. Not loudly. But slowly, with patient hands and steady movement. Nearby, another woman prepares dough. She mixes the ground grain with water, shaping it carefully. Her fingers move with ease, guided by memory rather than thought. There is no need to rush. The day is long. The sun has not yet reached its full strength. There is time. A child steps outside, blinking softly in the growing light. The ground feels cool beneath small feet. The air is still gentle, not yet warmed by the rising sun. The child watches the adults quietly, learning without being taught directly. This is how knowledge passes here. Not through long explanation, but through watching, through doing, through living. In the distance, the first light touches the tops of the fields. The green of the crops becomes clearer now. The shapes of the irrigation channels stand out more distinctly. The land begins to reveal itself fully, as if waking alongside the people. A man rises and walks toward the fields. He carries a simple tool. It is made of wood, shaped by hand, worn smooth from use. He does not speak as he walks. There is no need. His path is known. His work is known. Everything follows a quiet pattern. And so the day begins. Not with urgency. Not with noise. But with a gentle unfolding, one moment leading into the next, as it has for generations beyond memory. The sun rises slowly. The warmth begins to settle over the land. And the village continues, just as it always has, in the soft, steady rhythm of life beside the Nile. The sun continues its slow rise, lifting gently above the horizon. Its light spreads across the land in a quiet, steady way. It does not rush. It does not overwhelm. It simply arrives, touching the river first, then the fields, then the low mud brick walls of the village. The surface of the Nile begins to glow. Soft gold moves across the water, breaking gently with each small ripple. The current remains calm, carrying bits of floating reeds, small leaves, and fine grains of soil from places far upstream. These things travel without sound, drifting slowly past the village, as they have always done. The people do not watch them closely. They know the river brings many things. Most cannot be seen. Some cannot be named. But all are part of the same quiet system that keeps life moving forward. In the fields, the first workers begin their day. They step carefully along the narrow paths between crops. Their feet know where to land. They do not disturb the soft earth more than necessary. The soil here is precious. It holds moisture from the river. It holds the promise of growth. A man bends down, touching the ground lightly with his fingers. He presses gently, feeling the dampness just below the surface. This simple touch tells him much. It tells him if the water reached far enough during the night. It tells him if the channels are working as they should. He stands again, slowly. There is no sudden movement. Everything is done with a kind of quiet patience. Nearby, another man adjusts a small ridge of soil along an irrigation channel. With a simple wooden tool, he shifts the earth just slightly, guiding the flow of water into a different path. The water responds immediately. It turns, moving gently into the new space, filling it, soaking in. There is something deeply calm about this work. Nothing is forced. Nothing is hurried. The people do not fight the land. They listen to it. They follow its needs. And in return, the land continues to give. The rhythm of the Nile shapes everything. Each year, the river rises. Far to the south, beyond what most villagers will ever see, rains fall across distant lands. Those rains gather into streams, and those streams join the river, slowly swelling its waters. By the time the flood reaches the village, it is no longer a sudden event. It is expected. It is understood. The water rises gently, spreading over the fields. At first, it covers only the lowest ground. Then, slowly, it reaches farther, covering more of the land, turning the fields into a wide, shallow lake. During this time, the village grows quieter. There is less work to be done in the fields. The people stay closer to their homes. They repair tools. They mend baskets. They rest more often. The flood is not feared. It is welcomed. When the water finally begins to recede, it leaves something behind. A thin layer of dark, rich soil. Soft. Deep. Full of life. This soil is what makes everything possible. Without it, the land would dry and crack. Without it, nothing would grow. So each year, the same quiet cycle continues. The river rises. The fields flood. The water retreats. The soil remains. And the people begin again. This pattern is so steady, so reliable, that it shapes not only the work of the village, but also the way people understand time. Time here is not counted in exact numbers. It is not measured in strict lines. It is felt. It is known through change. Through the height of the river. Through the warmth of the air. Through the slow growth of crops and the gradual turning of seasons. A child does not learn time by numbers. A child learns time by watching. By noticing when the river begins to swell. By feeling when the nights become cooler. By seeing when the fields turn from green to gold. This way of knowing time is quiet. It does not require words. It does not require explanation. It simply exists, carried from one generation to the next. As the morning continues, the warmth of the sun grows stronger. Shadows shorten. The cool air begins to fade. But still, there is no rush. The people move steadily, never hurried, never still for too long. In one part of the village, a man works with reeds gathered from the riverbank. He sits on the ground, legs folded beneath him. His hands move slowly, weaving the reeds together into a simple basket. The motion is repetitive. Over and over, the same movement. The reeds bend easily, guided into place. There is a quiet rhythm in this work, much like the grinding of grain or the flow of water. It does not demand attention. It allows the mind to rest. Nearby, a woman shapes a clay pot. The clay is cool and soft beneath her fingers. She turns it slowly, smoothing its surface, shaping its sides evenly. The form grows gradually, rising from a simple lump into something useful. This pot will hold water. Or grain. Or oil. It will be used every day, touched many times, becoming part of the quiet life of the home. Nothing here is made quickly. Nothing is wasted. Each object has a purpose. Each object is cared for. Even when something breaks, it is not simply thrown away. Pieces are reused. Fragments find new roles. Everything remains part of the same calm, continuous cycle. The village itself seems to breathe. In the morning, it wakes. In the heat of midday, it slows. Later, as the sun begins to fall, it stirs again. This pattern repeats, day after day, without change. At midday, the sun stands high in the sky. Its light is strong now. The air feels heavier. Work in the fields becomes more difficult. So the people rest. They return to their homes, or sit in the shade of simple structures made from reeds and wood. The shade is soft and cool. It offers relief without effort. People sit quietly. Some speak in low voices. Others close their eyes, letting the warmth and stillness settle around them. There is no urgency to fill the silence. Silence itself is part of life here. It is not empty. It is full. Full of quiet thought. Full of gentle presence. Full of the steady passage of time. A child lies on the ground, watching the slow movement of shadows. The shapes shift gradually as the sun moves across the sky. There is nothing else that needs attention. Nothing else that demands action. And so, the child simply watches. In this way, even rest becomes meaningful. It is not separate from work. It is part of the same rhythm. As the afternoon slowly begins, the light softens again. The heat eases, just slightly. And once more, the village begins to move. Not suddenly. Not all at once. But gradually. As if guided by something quiet and unseen. The fields call the workers back. The river continues its endless flow. And life, in its calm and steady way, continues along the banks of the Nile. As the afternoon light begins to soften, the village settles into a quieter rhythm again. The harsh brightness of midday fades slowly, leaving behind a warmer, gentler glow. Shadows lengthen across the ground, stretching between the mud brick homes like soft lines drawn by the sun. In this light, everything feels more still. The village is never truly silent, but it often feels that way in moments like these. Sounds exist, but they are small. A door closing softly. A pot being set down. A distant call between two people who already know each other well. The homes themselves seem to hold the silence. They are made from the earth itself. Mud mixed with straw, shaped by hand, left to dry beneath the sun. Over time, they become strong in their own quiet way. Not permanent like stone, but steady enough to hold generations of life. Each wall carries a softness in its color. Pale brown, faded gold, sometimes touched with the marks of repair where new layers of mud have been added over old ones. Nothing here stays unchanged. Everything is renewed, gently, as needed. Inside one of these homes, the air is cooler. The thick walls hold back the heat of the day. The light that enters through small openings is dim and calm, falling in narrow beams onto the packed earth floor. A woman sits near the center of the room. She is not doing anything that demands urgency. Her hands rest in her lap. Nearby, a woven mat lies partly rolled, waiting to be used again later. This is a place of rest as much as work. Life inside these homes does not divide itself sharply between the two. Work and rest move into each other, like the river outside. One becomes the other without clear boundaries. A child lies on the floor, half awake, half dreaming. The sounds of the village drift in gently from outside. The distant call of a bird. The faint movement of wind through reeds. The soft steps of someone passing by. These sounds do not interrupt sleep. They become part of it. The homes are built not just for shelter, but for rhythm. They follow the needs of the day, the heat of the sun, the coolness of night. In the evening, when the air becomes softer again, families gather near their doorways. The ground outside is still warm from the day. People sit on simple mats or low platforms made of wood or woven reeds. They do not gather for noise or celebration. They gather because the day is ending, and togetherness feels natural at this hour. A small fire may be lit. Not large. Not bright. Just enough to warm food or cast a gentle glow. The smoke rises slowly, curling upward into the fading light. It carries a faint smell of grain, or herbs, or cooked vegetables. The sky above begins to change. The blue deepens. Then softens. Then shifts toward the pale colors of evening. In this light, the river looks different again. It no longer shines with the strong gold of midday. Now it reflects the sky more quietly, as if listening to it. Along its edges, reeds sway gently. Small creatures move between them, barely visible. The riverbank is never empty. Even when the village rests, life continues here. Inside the homes, preparation for night begins slowly. A woven mat is unrolled fully now. It is placed on the ground with care. Not rushed. Not thrown down. It becomes a space for sleep, for quiet, for stillness. A simple meal is shared. Bread, soft and slightly warm. A small portion of grain. Perhaps fruit gathered earlier in the day. Nothing excessive. Nothing wasted. Food here is not abundant in the way of excess. It is enough. And enough is a quiet kind of richness. As the light outside fades further, voices grow softer. Conversations do not stop suddenly. They taper off gently, like footsteps slowing on a long path. People do not resist the coming night. They move with it. Outside, the sky deepens again. The first stars begin to appear. Not all at once. One by one, slowly, as if the sky itself is remembering how to shine. In the village, lamps made of simple clay are lit in a few homes. Their light is small and steady. It does not reach far, but it is enough for the space it fills. A soft circle of warmth in the growing dark. The night in this place is not harsh. It is not filled with bright noise or constant movement. It arrives like a blanket, covering the land gently. The sounds of the day fade. What remains is softer. The rustle of wind. The distant call of an animal. The slow settling of the earth as it cools. In one home, an older man sits quietly near the doorway. He looks out at the village as it rests. His posture is relaxed, not tense. His eyes follow nothing in particular. He is simply there, present in the moment between day and night. He has seen many cycles like this. Many mornings. Many evenings. Many floods of the river. Many harvests. Time, for him, is not something measured in urgency. It is something lived slowly, one day at a time, like the turning of the river itself. Inside the home, others are already resting. Breathing slows. Bodies settle into stillness. Sleep arrives gently. Not as something forced, but as something natural, like the closing of a flower at dusk. Outside, the village becomes quieter still. The mud brick walls hold their warmth from the day. The ground cools slowly beneath the sky. The river continues its endless movement, even now, even in the dark. It does not stop. It never stops. But it does so without sound, without disruption. It simply continues. As it has always done. And in this continuation, there is a kind of comfort. A sense that nothing needs to be forced. Nothing needs to be rushed. Everything follows its own quiet path. The night deepens fully now. Stars fill the sky more completely. Their light is distant, soft, and steady. The village rests beneath them. And in this resting, there is no emptiness. Only the gentle presence of life paused, waiting for morning to return. Night does not end all at once in this place. It fades slowly, like breath leaving the air. Long before the sun appears, there is a quiet stage of darkness that feels neither fully night nor fully morning. The sky begins to shift, almost imperceptibly, from deep black to a softer shade of blue-gray. In the village, most people are still resting. The homes remain still. Their walls hold the warmth gathered from the previous day, slowly releasing it into the cooler air of early dawn. Outside, the Nile continues its steady movement. It does not change with the time of day. It does not pause. It flows as it always has, carrying with it the quiet memory of distant lands. Along the riverbank, mist gathers again. It is thin and pale, drifting low over the water. It softens everything it touches. Even sound feels muted in its presence. Soon, the first movements begin. A door opens carefully. A figure steps out into the early morning air. There is no rush. There is never rush at this hour. The world is still settling into itself. One by one, others follow. The village wakes in layers, not in a single moment. Each person rises in their own time, guided not by clocks or signals, but by habit, by need, by the natural rhythm of life. In the fields, the day's work begins again. The soil here is dark and rich, shaped by the river's long history. It feels slightly cool beneath the fingers when touched in the early morning. Men and women walk slowly between rows of crops. Their presence is calm. Their movement is deliberate. A simple tool rests in one hand. Often wood, sometimes stone, shaped carefully for its purpose. They use these tools not with force, but with rhythm. A steady pattern of movement. Adjusting soil. Guiding water. Clearing small weeds that compete for space among the crops. Nothing here is rushed. Everything is maintained. There is a deep understanding that the land responds not to pressure, but to care. At the edge of a field, a small irrigation channel runs quietly. Water flows through it in a thin, steady stream. A man kneels beside it, observing. He watches how it moves through the earth, how it fills one section and then slowly spreads into another. If needed, he adjusts the soil slightly with his hand, guiding the flow. This is not engineering in the modern sense. It is something more immediate. Something learned through experience and observation. The river teaches. The land teaches. The people listen. Farther away, someone is harvesting reeds again from the riverbank. The reeds grow in dense clusters, tall and flexible. They bend slightly in the breeze, creating a soft rustling sound that blends with the water's movement. Cutting them is a careful process. Only what is needed is taken. The rest is left to continue growing. Nothing here is taken in excess. Because excess would mean waste. And waste is not part of this way of life. The reeds will become many things. Baskets. Mats. Simple shelters. Ropes. Objects that support daily living in quiet, practical ways. Everything has a purpose. Everything returns to usefulness. In another part of the village, near the homes, grain is being prepared. It has been collected from the fields and stored in simple clay containers. Now it must be processed. This is slow work. Grain is poured onto flat stone surfaces. Another stone is used to grind it. The motion is repetitive. Forward. Back. Forward again. The sound is soft but constant. A rhythm that becomes almost meditative over time. Dust of grain rises slightly in the air. It carries a faint smell of earth and food combined. Nearby, a woman kneads dough. Her hands press and fold it gently. There is no machine to hurry this process. Only patience. Only touch. Only time. The dough changes slowly beneath her hands, becoming smoother, more unified. It will soon become bread. Bread that is simple, dense, and filling. Bread that carries the taste of the land itself. As the sun rises higher, warmth spreads across the village again. Shadows begin to shrink. The air becomes lighter, brighter, more open. But even as the day grows stronger, the pace of life remains steady. There is no urgency in the heat. No struggle against it. Instead, work adjusts. People move into shaded areas when needed. They rest when necessary. They continue when ready. In the fields, crops sway gently. Wheat and barley move with the wind in soft waves. They are not wild movements. They are controlled by structure, by planting patterns, by careful human planning. But they still feel natural. Still feel alive. The fields are not separate from the village. They are an extension of it. A shared space between people and land. A partnership that depends on balance. As midday approaches, the sun becomes stronger again. The air grows heavier. Movement slows. Workers return to shaded areas or back toward their homes. Rest is not optional. It is part of survival. The body is respected here. It is not pushed beyond what it can give. Inside homes, the air is cooler. The thick mud brick walls protect from the heat outside. People rest quietly. Some sleep. Some sit in silence. Some simply remain still, conserving energy for later in the day. Outside, the river continues its endless journey. Unchanged. Unbothered. Constant. Time in this place does not feel like something moving forward quickly. It feels like something circling. Repeating. Returning. Each day is similar, yet never exactly the same. Each season brings familiar patterns, yet subtle differences. Life here is not about change in the dramatic sense. It is about continuity. The quiet endurance of routines. The steady repetition of necessary tasks. And the deep understanding that survival depends not on speed, but on consistency. As the afternoon slowly begins to soften again, the village prepares for the next shift in the day. Work will resume. The fields will be tended again. Water will be guided again. Food will be prepared again. And the cycle will continue. Not because it is forced, but because it is natural. Like the river. Like the sun. Like time itself moving gently over the land. As the afternoon settles into its softer form, the Nile continues its quiet movement, unchanged in its purpose, patient in its path. It is never still. Even when the surface looks calm, almost like glass, there is always motion beneath it. A slow current, carrying everything forward in a direction no one resists. For the people living along its banks, the river is not only water. It is presence. It is memory. It is something that seems to hold time inside itself. They do not think of the river as separate from life. Life and river are intertwined in a way that is difficult to describe in simple words. Everything begins with it. Everything returns to it. In the distance, upstream beyond the visible horizon of the village, the river gathers strength from lands most villagers will never see. Rain falls far away, in places that feel almost imagined. That water slowly becomes part of this river, joining it quietly, without announcement. By the time it reaches the village, it is no longer new. It has traveled. It has passed through many spaces, many terrains, many unseen places. And so it carries something more than water. It carries continuity. The people understand this, not through explanation, but through experience. Each year, they watch the river rise. Not suddenly, but gradually. The change begins in small ways. The edges of the water creep a little farther onto the land. The soil near the banks becomes softer, wetter. The fields closest to the river begin to change their shape. There is no alarm in this. There is recognition. A familiar cycle returning once again. During the flood season, the village adjusts its rhythm. Some paths become submerged. Some fields disappear beneath shallow water. Movement shifts to higher ground. Life does not stop. It simply changes form. Boats become more common during this time. Simple wooden structures, light enough to float easily on the water. They move slowly along the flooded fields, carrying people, tools, and supplies. The water becomes a new kind of landscape. One that reflects the sky more fully, creating a wide, shimmering surface that stretches far beyond normal boundaries. In this season, the village feels different. Quieter in some ways. More reflective. The usual paths are replaced by water routes. The familiar becomes fluid. And yet, there is no fear in this transformation. Because it is expected. Because it always returns to balance. When the flood begins to recede, it leaves behind something essential. A thin layer of silt. Dark, rich, and full of life. This layer becomes the foundation for the next cycle of planting. It is the reason the fields remain fertile. The reason life continues year after year. Without it, the land would slowly return to desert. Dry. Empty. Still. But the river prevents that. It renews the land again and again, in a pattern that feels almost like breathing. Expansion. Retreat. Renewal. In the village, this rhythm becomes part of thought itself. Time is not measured only in days or hours. It is measured in the river's behavior. In how high it rises. In how far it retreats. In how much life the land holds afterward. A child growing up here does not learn time as something fixed. Instead, time is something felt through change in the environment. The rise of water. The return of soil. The growth of crops. The stillness of dry season. All of it becomes a kind of natural calendar, written not in numbers, but in earth and water. As the afternoon light begins to shift toward evening again, the river reflects the changing sky. The colors above it soften. Gold becomes pale. Blue deepens. The surface of the water carries these changes gently, as if it is remembering each shade before letting it fade. Along the banks, small movements continue. Birds settle into reeds. Fish ripple beneath the surface, occasionally breaking the water with quiet motion. The river is never empty. Even when it appears still, it is full of life. In a small village home near the edge of the settlement, an older person sits quietly near the doorway. Their gaze rests on the river in the distance. There is no urgency in their expression. Only attention. Only presence. They have seen this cycle many times. Flood and retreat. Planting and harvest. Growth and rest. To them, the river is not just a force of nature. It is a teacher. Not through words, but through repetition. Through consistency. Through the steady return of familiar patterns. Nearby, children play softly in the fading light. Their movements are slow, unstructured, calm. They are not separate from the environment they grow within. They are shaped by it. Just as the river shapes the land. Just as the land shapes the village. As evening approaches, the village begins to quiet again. Not suddenly, but gradually, like the lowering of a curtain. Work slows. Conversations soften. Movement becomes less frequent. The day does not end sharply here. It dissolves. The river continues its flow into the evening. Its surface darkens slightly as the light fades. But even in darkness, it remains present. Always moving. Always returning. Always continuing. And in this continuation, there is a sense of something steady beneath all change. A reminder that nothing is truly separate. That land, water, people, and time are all part of one continuous rhythm. A rhythm that does not hurry. A rhythm that does not break. Only flows. Quietly. Endlessly. Night has not fully arrived yet, but the village already begins to feel its approach. The light softens in a slow, almost unnoticeable way. Shadows stretch longer across the ground, reaching between homes, across narrow paths, over the edges of fields that now rest quietly after the day's work. In this fading light, everything feels more defined and at the same time more distant. Shapes are still visible, but less sharp. Sounds still exist, but lower in volume. Even movement seems to slow naturally, as if the entire village is exhaling at once. Inside one of the homes, a simple tool lies on the ground. It is made of wood and stone, shaped carefully by hand. Its surface is worn smooth from use. It has been held many times, repaired when needed, and passed along when necessary. Tools here are not replaced easily. They are kept, maintained, respected in their own quiet way. A hand reaches down and lifts it. The hand is not hurried. It is steady, familiar with this object. There is no hesitation in the movement. This tool has a purpose that is already understood. It does not need explanation. It is part of daily life in the same way breathing is. Outside, another person sits near the edge of a small work area. In front of them are reeds, freshly gathered earlier from the riverbank. They are being prepared for weaving. Each reed is selected carefully. Not all are equal. Some are too thick. Some too thin. Some too dry. The right ones are chosen with quiet attention. This process is slow. Not because it is difficult, but because it is careful. The reeds are laid side by side, then crossed, then bent gently into shape. Over time, a structure begins to form. A basket. Simple. Useful. Strong enough to carry grain, or tools, or anything needed in daily life. There is no decoration added for appearance alone. Beauty here comes from function. From balance. From the way something fits its purpose without excess. Nearby, another person works with stone. A grinding surface rests on the ground, worn smooth from long use. Grain is placed on it in small amounts. Then another stone is used to press and move it. Forward. Back. Forward again. The motion is repetitive, almost rhythmic. The sound is soft, but constant. It blends with the evening air, becoming part of the village itself. The grain slowly transforms into fine powder. This will later become bread. Bread that is simple, dense, and filling. Bread that carries the work of many hands within it. Not just the hands that grind it, but also those that planted the grain. Those that tended the fields. Those that guided water through irrigation channels. Everything is connected. Nothing exists alone. In another part of the village, clay is being shaped again. It is cool and soft at first touch. A person sits with it between their hands, slowly forming it into a container. The shape rises gradually. Not rushed. Not forced. Each movement adds a little more definition. A curve here. A slight narrowing there. The object becomes what it needs to be through time and patience. When finished, it will be left to dry. Then hardened by heat. Then used every day until it wears down again. And even then, it may be reused. Or repaired. Or reshaped into something else. Nothing is truly final in this cycle of making. Everything continues in new forms. As evening deepens, small fires begin to appear across the village. Not large fires. Not bright ones. Just enough to provide light and warmth. The glow they produce is soft and steady. It does not reach far, but it is enough for the space around it. People gather near these small fires. Not in large groups, but in small, familiar clusters. Families. Neighbors. Those who share daily space and quiet understanding. Food is prepared in simple ways. Grain is cooked. Bread is warmed. Sometimes vegetables or herbs are added, depending on what the land has provided. Meals are not elaborate. They are sufficient. And in that sufficiency, there is a quiet sense of stability. Children sit close to adults. Not speaking much. Just observing. Learning through presence. Through watching how hands move. How tools are used. How tasks are completed without unnecessary motion. There is no separation between learning and living. They are the same process. The sky above the village continues to darken. Stars begin to appear again, slowly, one by one. The river, now almost black in the fading light, still reflects them faintly. It remains in motion, even when almost invisible. A constant presence in the background of everything. Inside the homes, tools are set down carefully. Not discarded. Placed. Every object has its place. Every space has its purpose. People begin to rest again. Not abruptly, but gradually. Like the village itself settling into stillness. Outside, the wind moves gently across the fields. It passes over crops, over soil, over the edges of irrigation channels. It does not disturb. It simply moves through. The village does not resist the night. It accepts it, as it accepts the day. Both are part of the same cycle. Both are necessary. Both are temporary. And so, as darkness grows deeper, life slows further. Not stopping. Only resting. The tools remain where they were placed. The hands that used them now still. The fields wait quietly for morning. The river continues its endless path. And everything holds itself in a calm, steady pause between one day and the next. The night settles more deeply now. The village is no longer in transition between day and evening. It has fully entered stillness. The kind of stillness that is not empty, but complete. Light is limited to a few remaining embers from small fires. Their glow is faint, pulsing gently like slow breathing. Most homes are now dark from the outside, though inside, there is still life, quiet, resting, contained. Above, the sky is fully open. Stars spread across it in countless points of soft light. They do not feel distant in a sharp or unreachable way. Instead, they feel steady, like something familiar that has always been there, even when not noticed. The river continues to move through the darkness. It cannot be seen clearly now, but it is known. Its presence is understood by sound more than sight: the faint shifting of water against reeds, the slow passing of current along the banks. Even at night, it does not pause. It never has. In this quiet hour, the idea of survival becomes less visible, but more present. It is not something dramatic. It is not something spoken often. It is something embedded in every action taken during the day. Every grain stored. Every tool repaired. Every basket woven. Every field tended. All of it forms a quiet system of continuity. Not a system built through written rules, but through repetition, observation, and shared necessity. In one home, a storage space is carefully arranged. Clay jars stand in rows along the wall. Each one holds something different. Grain. Dried herbs. Oil. Water. The jars are sealed simply, often with cloth or clay stoppers, enough to protect their contents from dust, heat, and time. There is no excess. Storage here is not about abundance beyond need. It is about balance. Enough to carry through the seasons. Enough to survive the uncertainty of nature's cycles. In another home, a small exchange has taken place earlier in the day. A basket of grain for woven mats. Or reeds for clay pots. Or dried food for labor in the fields. These exchanges are simple. Direct. There is no complex measurement system guiding them in the modern sense. Instead, there is understanding. A shared sense of value shaped by daily life. People know what things require in effort. They know what things are worth in time, in labor, in energy. And so exchange happens naturally. Without tension. Without negotiation that feels separate from life itself. It is not commerce as an isolated activity. It is survival distributed among many hands. In the morning, before the heat rises, small exchanges often occur near the edges of the village. People meet briefly. Items are passed from one hand to another. A nod. A short phrase. Sometimes no words at all. Then they continue on their way. Each return to their own tasks. The village does not gather wealth in the way later societies might imagine wealth. It gathers stability. It gathers continuity. It gathers enough to ensure that life continues through each cycle of the river, each season of planting and harvest, each shift of weather. The river plays a quiet role in this system as well. Not only as water and soil, but as transportation. Small boats move along its surface when needed. They carry goods between settlements. They move slowly, following the current, or gently pushing against it with simple tools. These journeys are not frequent in the sense of constant movement. They are occasional. Purposeful. Each trip carries meaning tied to necessity rather than expansion. At the riverbank, goods may be loaded or unloaded. Bundles of grain. Reeds. Clay items. Simple tools. Everything is wrapped carefully, protected from moisture, from movement, from damage. Nothing here is treated as disposable. Everything requires effort to produce. And therefore, everything is treated with attention. As the night continues, the idea of time becomes even softer. There are no sharp divisions now. Only gradual transitions. The village exists in a long, quiet stretch of stillness broken only by occasional small sounds. A shifting body during sleep. A soft wind passing through reeds. The distant movement of water. Inside one home, a person remains awake for a little longer. Not because of urgency, but because of habit. Perhaps they are finishing a small repair. Perhaps they are simply sitting in thought. The light from a small oil lamp flickers gently nearby. Its flame is small but steady. It casts moving shadows on the wall, slow and unsteady, like silent patterns of time passing. Eventually, even this light is allowed to fade. The flame is extinguished carefully. Not abruptly. Just gently reduced until it disappears. And the room returns to darkness. Outside, the village is now fully asleep. Not in uniform silence, but in layers of rest. Some deep. Some light. Some shifting between dream and awareness. But all contained within the same larger stillness. The fields rest under the night sky. The irrigation channels lie quiet. The tools are set aside. The baskets are placed carefully where they will be found again. Nothing is abandoned. Everything is simply paused. And through it all, the Nile continues. Carrying water. Carrying soil. Carrying memory from distant places no one here will ever see. It does not change its pace for the village. But it allows the village to exist beside it, shaped by its rhythm, guided by its presence. This quiet relationship between people, land, and river is what sustains everything. Not abundance. Not force. But balance. A balance maintained day after day, season after season, generation after generation. And in this balance, survival becomes not a struggle, but a pattern. A steady continuation. Like breath. Like water. Like time moving gently through an ancient landscape. The night begins to loosen its hold slowly, though nothing changes quickly here. Darkness does not retreat in a straight line. It fades in layers, as if the world is gently remembering light again. The sky shifts first, a very subtle change, a softening at the edges where black becomes deep blue, and deep blue becomes something lighter still. The village remains quiet. Not frozen. Just resting. Even in sleep, there is awareness of cycles here. The body becomes familiar with the rhythm of the land, so familiar that even rest seems to follow its pattern. The Nile continues its steady movement beside everything. It does not hurry toward morning. It does not pause for night. It flows through both as if they are the same thing seen in different tones of light. And in this continuity, the idea of seasons begins to feel less like separate events and more like breathing patterns of the world itself. There is the season when the river rises. There is the season when it withdraws. There is the season when the land is wet and heavy. And there is the season when it is dry and cracked, waiting again. Each one is temporary. Each one returns. In memory, these changes are never forgotten. Even when one season ends, it remains present in thought. People remember the flood not as a single event, but as a feeling. The slow approach of water across fields. The way paths disappear beneath shallow lakes. The way the village becomes more connected to boats than to land for a time. During that season, movement changes completely. The usual walking paths no longer exist in the same way. People glide across water instead of walking across earth. Homes feel closer together in some ways, yet separated by water in others. And still, there is no sense of disruption. Only adjustment. A shift in how life is arranged. The flood does not arrive as an enemy. It arrives as a known visitor. One that brings both change and renewal. When the waters rise, the soil beneath them softens. It becomes rich with material carried from far away. Silt settles slowly, layer upon layer, unseen but essential. This is what the people understand deeply, even if they do not describe it in technical terms. They know that what the river brings is not only water, but renewal of the land itself. When the water finally begins to withdraw, it does so with the same calmness it arrived with. No rush. No sudden retreat. Just a gradual revealing of earth again. Fields emerge slowly from beneath the surface. Dark, moist, full of potential. And in those fields, life begins again almost immediately. Seeds are placed into the ground. Carefully. Deliberately. As if returning something to a place that already understands how to receive it. The memory of flood remains in the soil. It is not visible, but it is present in every growing plant. In every stalk of grain that rises from the earth. In every harvest that follows. Even when the flood is gone, it is not truly gone. It stays in the land. It stays in the rhythm of planting. It stays in the way people prepare for its return each year. In the village, this understanding shapes patience. There is no expectation that everything must happen at once. Growth is slow. Change is gradual. Even survival is a process that unfolds over time rather than in sudden moments. As dawn begins to approach more clearly now, faint sounds begin to return. A shift in air. A slight movement outside a doorway. A distant bird calling without urgency. The village does not wake in one motion. It returns to awareness piece by piece. Like memory becoming active again. In one home, a person opens their eyes but remains still for a moment. Listening. Not to anything specific. But to everything at once. The sound of the river. The quiet of the fields. The faint presence of wind moving through reeds. All of it together forms the sense of morning before morning fully arrives. Outside, the sky is no longer dark. But it is not yet bright. It is in between. A space where time feels suspended. This is often when thought feels clearest in the village. Before labor begins. Before heat rises. Before movement becomes full again. But even here, there is no urgency to act quickly. The day will begin when it is ready. And the people will begin with it. In this way, life remains closely tied to natural timing rather than imposed structure. The river's cycle defines the broader rhythm. The seasons define the deeper rhythm. And daily life moves within those larger patterns like a small current within a greater flow. In the memory of older villagers, these cycles are not counted as separate years in the modern sense. They are remembered as layers. Each flood adding another layer. Each harvest adding another layer. each season of dryness adding another layer of patience. Over time, life becomes not a line moving forward, but a deep accumulation of repeated experience. And in that accumulation, there is a kind of quiet wisdom, not spoken loudly, not recorded in formal systems, but lived. In hands that know how to plant without instruction. In eyes that can read the river's rise without measurement. In bodies that understand when to rest and when to move simply by feeling the world around them. As the first real light of morning begins to touch the horizon again, the village gently shifts. Not suddenly. Not completely. But enough to signal the return of another day. And the cycle continues, as it always has. Flood remembered in soil. Seasons remembered in rhythm. Life carried forward in quiet repetition. Morning does not arrive as a single moment here. It spreads. Slowly. Quietly. Like light pouring into a bowl until it is full. The horizon begins to glow first, a soft line of pale gold stretching across the edge of the world. Then the sky above it lightens in layers, as if the darkness is being gently lifted rather than pushed away. In the village, the first movements begin again. A door opens with care. Footsteps touch the cool ground outside. There is no urgency in these actions. The body moves in familiar patterns, guided more by habit than by thought. The air is still slightly cool from the night. It carries the faint dampness of the river nearby, mixing with the smell of earth and dried reeds. The Nile is already awake in its own way. It never sleeps. It simply changes its tone. At this hour, its surface reflects the sky more softly, less gold and more pale silver blue. It flows as it always does, carrying small fragments of plant life, slow currents of sediment, and the invisible memory of distant rains. Along its banks, reeds stand still, slightly bent from the night wind. They will move again soon. But for now, they rest. In the village, small routines return. A person bends near a storage jar, removing grain for the morning. Another gathers simple tools placed carefully the night before. Someone else begins to light a small fire. Not large. Not bright. Just enough to warm food, to boil water, to begin the day in a way that feels steady and familiar. Smoke rises gently into the air. Thin. Soft. Almost disappearing as it rises. The fields, still damp from the night's coolness, begin to call people back. Not with sound. But with understanding. This is where much of life returns each day. Out beyond the homes, the land stretches in quiet rows of cultivated earth. It does not look wild. It does not look untouched. It carries the shape of long attention. Lines of crops stand in orderly patterns, shaped by generations of careful planting. Barley. Wheat. Flax. Each growing in its own place, each following its own quiet rhythm of growth. People move into the field slowly. They do not arrive in groups that feel separate from the land. They enter it as if becoming part of it again. Some carry simple wooden tools. Others carry baskets. Others arrive with only their hands ready for work. The tasks of the morning are familiar. Weeding small plants that have grown where they should not. Checking irrigation channels for proper flow. Adjusting small ridges of earth to guide water evenly across the soil. Everything is done with care. Not force. A man kneels beside a channel, watching the water move through it. It is a thin stream, but steady. He uses his hand to shift a small section of soil, and immediately the flow changes direction slightly, spreading more evenly into the field. He watches this change without expression. Not because it is unimportant, but because it is expected. This is how things work here. Small adjustments. Small attentions. Over time, they create balance. Nearby, another person is working with grain. The harvest from a previous cycle is being processed again. It is placed on a flat stone surface and ground slowly. The motion is repeated over and over. A steady rhythm that feels almost like breathing. Forward. Back. Forward again. The sound blends into the environment. It becomes part of the village's background noise, like the river itself. In another part of the field, a woman walks slowly between rows of crops. Her eyes move carefully over the plants. She notices where growth is strong, where it is weaker, where the soil looks too dry or too compact. She does not hurry. Observation is part of the work. Attention is part of survival. A child follows a short distance behind, not interfering, but watching. Learning not through instruction, but through presence. Through repetition. Through seeing the same actions performed day after day. The sun continues to rise higher. The light becomes stronger. Shadows shorten. The fields begin to warm. Work continues, but slowly adjusts to the growing heat. Some tasks move into shaded areas. Others pause briefly. Nothing stops completely. It only changes form. The village understands heat as part of the rhythm. Not as an interruption, but as a condition that must be moved with rather than resisted. By late morning, the fields are fully active. Movement is steady, balanced, measured. There is no wasted motion. Everything serves a purpose. Even silence has purpose here. In the distance, the river remains visible between reeds and banks of earth. It is unchanged in its constant flow. But it reflects the day differently now. The stronger light makes its surface brighter, more reflective, almost shimmering. It appears calm even when currents beneath it move steadily forward. This dual nature still surface, moving depth is something the villagers understand without needing to describe it. Much like their own lives. Outward calm. Inner motion. As midday approaches again, the heat begins to grow heavier. Work slows slightly. Bodies begin to seek shade. A natural pause forms in the rhythm of labor. Not enforced. Not required. Simply understood. People gather near small shaded areas along the edge of the fields or return briefly to the village. Water is shared. Food is eaten slowly. There is no rush to consume or to finish. The act itself is part of the day's balance. Even rest here is part of work. Because without it, the rhythm would break. And breaking the rhythm would mean losing the balance that keeps everything functioning. The river continues its path through all of this. Unchanged. Unbothered. Always moving forward. Carrying with it the memory of faraway rains and distant lands no one in the village will ever see. And yet, it is deeply present in everything they do. In the soil. In the crops. In the timing of every action. In the very shape of the land itself. As the afternoon begins to lean forward again, the cycle prepares to continue. The fields will be revisited. The tools will be used again. The water will be guided again. And life will keep unfolding, quietly, steadily, without interruption. Like a river that never stops finding its way forward through time. The afternoon does not end suddenly. It thins out. That is how it feels in the village. The strong light of midday begins to soften little by little, as if the sun itself is growing quieter. Shadows return slowly, stretching out again across the fields, no longer short and sharp, but long and gentle. The air changes first. It loses the heavy weight of heat and begins to feel lighter against the skin. There is still warmth, but it is no longer pressing. It becomes something easier to live within. In the fields, the pace of work naturally slows. Not because anyone announces it. Not because anything stops. But because the body understands. Hands begin to rest more often between tasks. Movements become less frequent, more deliberate, conserving energy for the final part of the day. The Nile continues its steady flow in the distance. It reflects the changing sky without effort. Now the water carries a mix of light and shadow, gold fading into soft blue, as if the river is holding both day and night at the same time. Along its banks, reeds shift slightly in the evening breeze. Small sounds return more clearly now. A bird calling from far away. The faint movement of animals returning toward shelter. The soft steps of people beginning to move back toward the village. This return is not rushed. It is a familiar migration. Fields slowly empty. Not all at once, but gradually. Like water leaving a surface it once covered. People gather tools that were left in the soil during the day. They carry them with calm hands. Nothing is thrown aside. Everything is accounted for. Everything is returned to its place. The village itself begins to reappear as a center of movement again. During the day, life spreads outward into the fields. In the evening, it draws inward again. Toward homes. Toward shared spaces. Toward rest. A woman walks slowly along a narrow path back from the fields. Her body carries the quiet weight of the day's labor, not as exhaustion alone, but as familiarity. She does not appear hurried. There is no need to be. The work of the day has been completed in its natural measure. Nearby, a child walks beside an adult, holding nothing, simply moving with the rhythm of return. The path beneath their feet is familiar. It has been walked countless times before. Each step feels known, even without conscious thought. As the village becomes more active again, small fires are lit. One by one. Not everywhere at once. Just in scattered places where families gather. The glow of fire returns to the landscape, soft and steady. It does not compete with the fading sunlight. It complements it. Smoke rises again into the evening air. Thin. Slow. Carrying the smell of cooked grain and simple food. Inside the homes, preparation begins quietly. Food is shared in small portions. Bread, made earlier in the day. Grain softened with water or heat. Occasionally vegetables or herbs gathered from nearby fields. There is nothing excessive in these meals. Nothing complicated. Everything is based on what the land provides and what the day allows. People sit together near doorways or inside dim interiors where the light from small lamps flickers gently. Conversation is soft. Often unnecessary. Silence is not uncomfortable here. It is part of the evening itself. Outside, the sky continues its slow transformation. Blue deepens. Then darkens. Then opens again into night. The first stars appear once more. One by one. Not in clusters. But in patience. The river, now darker and more reflective, becomes almost invisible except for faint lines of movement where light touches it. It remains active beneath the surface of night. Always flowing. Always continuing. In one home, someone sits quietly near the edge of a simple mat. Their hands are still. Their posture relaxed. There is no task left for the day. Only the quiet presence of being in a space that is safe and familiar. Nearby, tools are placed carefully against a wall. Not discarded. Placed. As they are every evening. Everything has its location. Everything returns to order after use. This sense of arrangement is not rigid. It is natural. A reflection of the broader order seen in the river, in the fields, in the seasons. As the night deepens further, voices in the village become fewer. Not stopped. Just softened. Then gradually absent. Sleep does not arrive in a single moment. It spreads. Through homes. Through bodies. Through awareness itself. The village settles into rest the same way it wakes slowly, in layers. Outside, the fields are dark now. They rest after their day of attention. The irrigation channels are quiet. The tools are still. The soil holds the memory of work without needing to show it. And through it all, the Nile continues its endless movement. unchanged by the ending of the day, unchanged by the beginning of night. It carries everything forward without interruption. Time in the village does not break into separate pieces here. It flows. Like water. Like breath. Like the slow closing and opening of each day. And as the village enters full rest once again, there is no sense of ending. Only continuation. Only return. Only the quiet certainty that morning will come again, and with it, the same gentle rhythm of life beside the river. The night deepens further now, moving past the softer edges of evening and into something more complete. It is no longer a transition. It is presence. A full covering of stillness across the land. The village is quiet in a way that feels whole, not empty. The kind of quiet that settles into the earth itself, into the walls of homes, into the spaces between objects that no longer need to be used. Above, the sky is wide and full. Stars remain steady, scattered in patterns that seem unchanged from night to night. They do not move in ways the eye can easily see. They simply exist, constant and distant, like quiet witnesses to everything below. The Nile flows beneath them, unseen in most places now, except where faint reflections catch the starlight. Even in darkness, it does not lose its direction. It continues forward, as it always has. Along its banks, reeds stand still. No wind moves through them now. Even the small sounds that existed earlier in the evening have faded. What remains is near silence. Not absolute silence. But something close enough that every small detail feels more present. A soft shift of earth cooling after the day's heat. The distant, almost imagined movement of water against stone. The faint settling of materials inside homes as they adjust to cooler air. Inside the village, people sleep in different depths of rest. Some lie deeply still, fully surrendered to sleep. Others remain in lighter states, drifting between awareness and dreams. Sleep here is not rushed or forced. It arrives naturally, like everything else in the cycle of life. Like morning. Like evening. Like the river's flow. In one home, a small oil lamp has long since been extinguished. The space inside is dark, but not unfamiliar. Darkness is not something feared in this place. It is something known. Something expected. The shapes of objects still exist, even when not visible. The mind remembers them. The body knows where they are. There is a sense of order even in darkness. Nearby, another home holds the quiet breathing of several people resting together. Their presence is steady. Slow. Rhythmic. It blends into the surrounding silence rather than interrupting it. Outside, the air cools further. The ground releases the warmth it held from the day, returning it slowly to the night. The river continues its movement through this cooling world. It does not change in response to temperature or light. It does not pause for sleep. It moves as it always does. Carrying fragments of soil, plant matter, and memory from places far beyond the reach of the village. There is something almost eternal in its motion. Not because it is unchanging, but because it is continuous. In the absence of human movement, the river becomes the most present sound in the landscape. Even when it is not heard directly, it is felt. A presence rather than a noise. A direction rather than an interruption. The village, now fully asleep, appears smaller in the vastness of the night. Its homes are simple shapes against the darker earth. Its paths are invisible now, held only in memory until morning returns. Yet within this stillness, nothing is broken. Everything is in its place. The tools remain where they were left. The fields rest where they were worked. The irrigation channels hold their quiet paths through the soil. And the people, though asleep, remain connected to all of it. In dreams, perhaps, there is movement. Not in the sense of travel or urgency, but in the gentle processing of daily life. The repetition of familiar actions. The echo of water moving through fields. the memory of hands shaping clay or weaving reeds. Dreams here are not separate from waking life in a sharp way. They are an extension of it. A softer continuation. Outside, the sky reaches its deepest tone of night. The stars appear more numerous now, as if the darkness itself has expanded their visibility. They remain steady, unchanged in their distance. The river below them continues its long, uninterrupted path. And between these two vast presences, sky above and water below, the village rests in a narrow band of human life. Small, quiet, temporary, but not insignificant, because it is part of the same rhythm, part of the same system of flow and return. As the night continues, even time feels slower. Not stopped, but softened. The distinction between one moment and the next becomes less defined. There is only continuation, only presence, only the steady existence of everything in its resting form. And so the village remains in sleep, held gently between river and sky, between memory and tomorrow, between what has been done and what will be done again. Nothing ends here. Nothing truly pauses. It only shifts into another form of stillness. A stillness that holds the promise of return, of morning light, of work beginning again, of water moving through fields once more. And in that quiet promise, the night continues to deepen, until even thought becomes soft, and everything rests in the calm flow of an ancient, unbroken world. Before the sky changes, the world changes first in feeling. That is how dawn begins in this village. Not with light, but with a quiet shift in the air. The deepest part of night has already passed, though nothing announces it. There is no sound marking the transition. Only a subtle easing of darkness, as if the world is slowly exhaling after a long breath. The Nile continues to move through it all. Unbroken. Unbothered. Its presence is constant even when unseen, carrying the memory of faraway lands through water that never stops traveling. Along its banks, the reeds remain still. The fields remain dark. The village remains in rest. Yet something begins to change. Not visibly. Not sharply. But gradually, in the way silence feels slightly different than it did an hour before. Inside the homes, sleep begins to shift. Not ending. Just loosening. A deeper stillness giving way to a lighter one. People do not wake yet. But their bodies begin to move through stages of rest that feel closer to awareness. Breathing becomes a little more varied. The mind starts to drift toward the edges of waking life. Outside, the sky is still dark. But it is no longer absolute. There is a sense of space within it now. A faint openness that was not present before. The night begins its slow retreat. The river reflects none of this directly. It simply continues. Its surface, though dark, carries movement that does not depend on light. It is always in motion. Always carrying forward what has come before. In one home, a person turns slightly in their sleep. Not waking. Only adjusting. A natural response to the approaching change in the world outside. In another, someone opens their eyes briefly but remains still, listening to the quiet. There is nothing to hear in the usual sense. But there is awareness of everything at once. The coolness of early air. The faint presence of the river. The distant structure of fields waiting beyond the village. All of it exists together in a soft, suspended state. This is the moment before morning begins to declare itself. A space that belongs to neither night nor day. In this space, time feels almost unnecessary. There is no movement required. No task waiting to begin yet. Only the slow turning of the world toward light. Outside, the land remains still. The fields are dark shapes resting against the horizon. The irrigation channels are invisible now, though they still exist beneath the surface of soil and memory. The village paths are quiet, waiting to be walked again. Even the air feels paused. Not empty. just waiting. The Nile continues its silent passage beside everything. It does not prepare for morning. It does not respond to it. It simply continues its rhythm through every phase of time. Carrying sediment. Carrying memory. Carrying life itself in a form that does not change with light or darkness. And yet, as dawn approaches, something subtle happens across the entire landscape. A sense of readiness emerges. Not from intention, but from repetition. From countless mornings that have come before this one. The world knows what comes next. Even without thought. Even without awareness. The shift continues slowly. The darkness begins to thin at the edges of the sky. Barely noticeable at first. Then gradually clearer. A faint gradient forms where night begins to give way. The village remains mostly asleep. But it is no longer held in deep night. It is now in the threshold between states. Between stillness and movement. Between rest and return. In this threshold, everything feels softer. Sounds have not yet returned fully. Light has not yet arrived fully. But the expectation of both is already present. Inside the homes, people begin to drift closer to waking. Not actively, but as part of the world's own change. Sleep becomes lighter. Thought becomes nearer to awareness. Still, no one rises yet. There is no need to rush toward the day. The day will arrive on its own. Just as it always has. Outside, the first hint of change appears along the horizon. A faint line that is not quite light, but not quite darkness either. It is the beginning of visibility returning to the world. The Nile reflects it subtly. The fields begin to separate from the darkness in faint outlines. The village is still quiet. But it is no longer fully asleep in the same way. It is holding the moment just before waking. A moment that feels suspended. Gentle. Unhurried. And in this space, the entire rhythm of life gathers itself again. Ready. Not abruptly. But naturally. Like a breath that has not yet been released. The world waits. And in waiting, it prepares to begin once more. The moment before morning does not last long, but it never feels rushed either. It ends the same way it always does, without announcement, without interruption, just a quiet shift in the world that allows light to finally arrive. At first, it is not bright. It is only a suggestion of brightness. A pale glow spreading slowly across the horizon, touching the edges of the land with something softer than color, something closer to presence. The Nile is the first to reflect it. Even before the village fully notices, the river begins to change in appearance. Its dark surface slowly loosens, revealing faint silver tones, as if the water is remembering the sky above it. It continues its movement without pause. It always does. Along the banks, reeds begin to reappear in shape rather than silhouette. The fields, still quiet, start to separate from the darkness. Not fully visible yet. But no longer hidden. In the village, the first true signs of waking begin. A door opens carefully. Not suddenly. Not widely. Just enough to allow a person to step outside into the cooling air of early morning. The ground is slightly damp from the night. It feels familiar beneath bare feet. The air carries a gentle freshness, untouched by the heat that will come later. Inside homes, movement begins in small stages. A hand reaching for a mat. A slow shift of position. A body adjusting from sleep into awareness. There is no urgency in any of it. Morning does not demand speed. It simply arrives. One home after another begins to respond to it. Not all at once. But in a quiet sequence that feels almost natural, like a wave moving through still water. Outside, the sky continues its transformation. The deep darkness of night is now gone. In its place, soft gradients of blue and pale gold stretch across the horizon. The sun itself is not visible yet, but its presence is already shaping everything. The village begins to sound again. Not loudly. Not sharply. But gently. A soft movement of life returning. A faint sound of a fire being rekindled. A pot placed carefully on the ground. A brief exchange of words between neighbors who already understand each other without needing much speech. In the fields, the land waits. It does not rush the return of human activity. It simply exists, ready. The irrigation channels are still. The soil is cool. The crops stand quietly in rows, unchanged by the night, waiting for attention once again. A person steps out toward the fields. Then another. And another. Not in a group that feels coordinated, but in a shared understanding that this is what the morning brings. Work will begin again. Slowly. As it always does. The river remains steady beside all of this. Its flow is unchanged by the return of movement in the village. It does not accelerate with human activity. It does not slow for rest. It simply continues its long, uninterrupted path. The sky grows brighter now. The first clear light begins to touch the tops of distant fields. Shadows begin to shorten again, though they are still long and soft at this hour. The world feels newly formed, even though nothing has truly changed. This is a quiet illusion of morning. That everything has started again. When in truth, nothing ever stopped. Inside the village, life resumes its familiar patterns. Water is drawn. Grain is prepared. Tools are gathered. Simple tasks begin again, each one connected to the land and to the river in ways that feel both practical and timeless. A child watches someone working with grain. Not speaking. Only observing. Learning without instruction. As is often the way here. The sun finally begins to show itself at the edge of the horizon. Not yet fully risen. Just a curved glow emerging from behind the land. Its light spreads slowly across the fields, touching soil, water, and stone with equal gentleness. The village becomes fully visible now. Not transformed. Just revealed. Everything is as it was. And yet everything feels present again in a new way. The day has begun. Not sharply. Not loudly. But completely. And as it unfolds, the same rhythm that has always existed returns once more. River flowing. Fields waiting. People moving. Time continuing. Quiet. Steady. Unbroken. Morning is now fully present, but it does not feel like a beginning anymore. It feels like continuation. The light has settled across the village, spreading evenly over rooftops, fields, and the narrow paths between homes. Shadows exist, but they are no longer long or uncertain. They sit close to objects, following their shape quietly. The Nile moves beside everything as it always does. Its surface reflects the sky in a steady, unchanging rhythm. Sometimes bright. Sometimes muted. But always moving forward, never holding on to any single moment for long. In the fields, work resumes in its familiar form. There is no sense that this is a separate day from the one before. Only the awareness that the same tasks return, slightly adjusted by time, weather, or the condition of the soil. A person bends to examine the earth again. It is the same gesture performed countless times before, yet it is never identical. The soil is always slightly different. Its moisture, its texture, its response to touch, all subtle variations that guide the work of the hands. Nearby, another person adjusts an irrigation channel. The water responds immediately, shifting direction in a soft, controlled movement. Nothing resists it. Nothing forces it. The system works because everything within it understands its place. In the village, life continues to unfold in quiet repetition. Grain is measured and carried. Bread is shaped and prepared. Tools are used, then returned. Water is drawn from storage or directly from the river, depending on need. Each action is simple on its own. but together, they form the structure of survival. Not dramatic. Not fragile. Just steady. Over time, something subtle becomes clear in this rhythm of daily life. The days do not feel like separate units stacked on top of each other. They feel like layers. One resting over another. Each leaving behind a faint impression of what came before. Work done yesterday influences today's work. The condition of the fields reflects weeks of attention. The stored grain carries the memory of past harvests. Even the tools carry traces of use that cannot be removed. They become smoother, worn, familiar. And in this familiarity, there is comfort. Not excitement. Not novelty. But continuity. Children grow within this rhythm without needing it explained. They do not learn life in a sudden moment. They absorb it slowly. Through watching. Through imitation. Through participation in small tasks that increase gradually over time. A child who once only observed now begins to carry small objects. Later, they assist in simple work. Eventually, they become part of the same cycle that once surrounded them as observers. Aging in this place is not marked by abrupt change. It is gradual. Like the movement of the river. Like the shift of seasons. Like the slow deepening of understanding that comes from repetition. Older people sit in familiar places within the village. They are not separated from daily life. They remain within it, though their role changes. They observe more. They guide when needed. They rest more often, but remain connected to everything around them. Their presence carries memory. Not written memory, but lived memory. The memory of floods that shaped the land. The memory of harvests that fed the village. The memory of years that passed without needing to be named individually. Time here is not divided into sharp segments. It is experienced as continuity. A long, flowing presence that does not break easily. The river reinforces this sense more than anything else. It is always moving. Yet it always feels the same. Each moment of it is different from the last, but together it forms something stable. A constant presence in the lives of everyone along its banks. As the day continues, the sun moves across the sky in its familiar arc. Heat builds slowly, then softens again as time passes. The village adjusts without conscious thought. Work moves between shade and open air. Rest is taken when needed. Activity resumes when ready. There is no strict division between labor and pause. Only rhythm. Only balance. In the fields, plants continue their quiet growth. Unseen changes happen beneath the surface of soil. Roots expand. Water spreads. Life continues in ways that are not always visible but always present. Nothing here is rushed. Because nothing here needs to be. Everything depends on time behaving as it always has. Predictably. Steadily. Without interruption. Even the idea of the future feels less like a distant unknown and more like a continuation of what is already happening. Tomorrow is not separate. It is an extension. Another turn of the same cycle. Another movement of the same river. Another day shaped by the same land, the same water, the same quiet patterns of survival. As afternoon slowly approaches, the village does not prepare for something new. It simply continues. And in this continuation, there is a kind of quiet permanence that does not require attention to be understood. It is simply lived. Day after day. Season after season. Generation after generation. Like the river that never stops moving. And never needs to explain why. Afternoon begins to loosen its grip on the village in the same way it always does. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. But gradually, as if the day itself is slowly exhaling. The sun is still present, still warm, still high enough to hold the land in light. Yet something in its quality changes. The brightness softens at the edges. Shadows begin to lengthen again, stretching quietly across paths, fields, and the spaces between homes. The Nile continues its movement beside everything. It does not change with the hour. It does not respond to the slowing of human activity. It simply flows, steady and uninterrupted, carrying its long history of water from distant lands toward places that will never see its source. In the fields, work begins to slow. Not because it is finished, but because the day is moving toward its closing shape. Hands pause more often. Movements become less frequent. Tasks are completed rather than extended. There is a natural awareness that what can be done today has its limit. And that limit is not resistance. It is rhythm. People begin to return from the fields in a quiet, steady flow. Not in groups marked by structure, but in a gentle dispersal of movement that feels more like water leaving a wide surface than labor ending. Tools are carried back carefully. Nothing is left behind without intention. Everything used is returned. Everything borrowed from the land is acknowledged in some quiet way through care and placement. The village begins to gather itself inward again. Just as it did the day before. Just as it will tomorrow. Inside homes, the familiar pattern resumes. Small fires are lit. Food is prepared. Water is stored or used. Simple actions, repeated without urgency. There is no sense of completion in a final sense. Only the closing of one phase of motion and the beginning of stillness. Children sit near doorways, watching the shift of light. They do not comment on it. They simply observe. As they always do. Learning the day not through instruction, but through presence. The sky above begins its slow transition again. Blue deepens. Then softens. Then begins to fade into warmer tones near the horizon. The river reflects this change in a quiet, unbroken way. It does not hold on to any one color. It simply receives what is above it and lets it pass. In one part of the village, a person sits quietly after finishing work. Their hands are still. Their body relaxed. There is no urgency left in the day. Only the remaining presence of it. Around them, life continues in softer forms. Voices are lower. Movements are slower. Even sounds seem to settle closer to the ground. As evening approaches, the sense of ending becomes more visible. Not as a conclusion, but as a transition. A familiar movement toward rest. Fires appear again in small clusters. Their light is warm, contained, steady. Smoke rises into the cooling air, carrying the scent of grain, wood, and cooked food. Inside homes, people gather as they always do. Not for ceremony. Not for event. But for the simple continuation of shared living. Meals are eaten slowly. Conversations are brief or unnecessary. Silence returns often between words, not as absence, but as comfort. Outside, the sky deepens once more. The first stars appear again. One by one. Patient and unchanged. The river continues beneath them, flowing through night as it flows through day. Uninterrupted. Unquestioning. The village begins to quiet again. Not all at once. But in stages. Like a breath releasing. Like a body settling into rest after movement. Homes grow darker from the outside. Inside, lamps are dim or already extinguished. People lie down to sleep in familiar spaces. On mats. On simple bedding. In positions shaped by repetition and habit. Sleep comes gently. Without resistance. Without urgency. The fields outside rest again under the open sky. They do not sleep in the way people do. But they pause in their own way. Holding the memory of work within soil and roots. Waiting, as they always do, for the return of morning. The river remains the only constant motion in the stillness. Even now. Even here. Even in darkness. It continues forward, carrying everything it has always carried. And in this endless movement, there is no final moment. No true ending. Only return. Only repetition. Only the quiet understanding that what ends in one form begins again in another. Night settles fully over the village. Complete. Soft. Unbroken. And within it, everything rests. Not as something finished, but as something held gently between one cycle and the next. In the deepest part of night, when the village is fully still and even thought feels softened by sleep, the world does not feel empty. It feels held. Held by something larger than any single day, or season, or lifetime. The Nile continues its movement through this darkness without change. It does not need light to know its direction. It does not need witnesses to continue its path. It flows because it has always flowed. Far upstream, beyond the reach of the village, waters gather from distant places. Rain that fell long ago, in lands far away, becomes part of this same river. It travels slowly, patiently, without memory of where it began, only certainty of where it continues. By the time it reaches these quiet villages, it is no longer new. It is old with distance. It is shaped by journey. And yet it still carries life in every movement. Along its banks, the land rests in silence. The fields are dark, but not empty. The soil holds what was given to it during the day: water, labor, attention, care. These things are not visible now, but they remain within it, waiting for the next return of light. The village itself is no longer active in any outward sense. Homes are closed. Fires are extinguished. Paths are still. But within this stillness, nothing is truly absent. Life is simply resting in its quieter form. Breathing slowly. Unseen. Unspoken. Inside one home, a person turns slightly in sleep. Outside, the river moves past without pause. These two motions exist at the same time, unaware of each other in a direct way, yet connected through something deeper than awareness. A shared rhythm. A shared continuity. Time here does not break into separate pieces that end completely. It folds. It repeats. It returns. Every morning is shaped by the memory of night. Every night carries the echo of morning. Every flood carries the memory of past floods. Every harvest carries the memory of those before it. Nothing is lost in the way it feels lost elsewhere. Everything becomes part of the ongoing pattern. The river is the closest expression of this truth. It is always changing, yet always the same. Its surface is never identical from one moment to the next, but its presence remains constant enough to anchor entire lives around it. People are born beside it. They grow beside it. They work beside it. They rest beside it. And eventually, they return to the same earth that the river once enriched. Not as disappearance, but as continuation in another form. The village, in its quiet repetition, becomes part of this larger movement. It does not stand apart from nature. It does not observe it from a distance. It exists within it, shaped by it, sustained by it, returning to it again and again. Even silence here feels different. It is not absence. It is fullness without movement. A kind of presence that does not require sound to be real. Above the village, the sky remains wide and open. Stars continue their steady watch, unchanged by human life below. They do not mark time in the same way. But they witness it passing in layers, generation after generation. The river reflects none of this directly. It simply continues forward. Through night. Through day. Through seasons that rise and fall like breath. And in this endless movement, there is no final destination. Only passage. Only flow. Only the quiet truth that everything that exists here is part of something that does not end when attention turns away. It continues. Softly. Steadily. Without interruption. And so, in the deepest calm of the night, the village rests once more beside the river that never forgets how to move forward. Not toward an end. but toward the next quiet beginning that is already on its way. In the stillness after stillness, even the idea of continuation begins to soften. The village sleeps. The fields rest. The river moves. And time, in this quiet place, feels less like a line and more like a slow circle drawn in water. There is no moment when the Nile decides to begin again, because it never truly stops. It does not separate its life into chapters the way human memory does. It carries everything at once: what was, what is, and what will come, without needing to divide them. Along its banks, the land listens without awareness. It is shaped not by force, but by repetition. Water arrives, retreats, returns again. Soil receives, settles, and renews itself in silence. Nothing argues with this rhythm. Nothing resists it for long. Even the village, in all its small, steady motion, is part of that same quiet agreement. To wake. To work. To rest. To return. Over and over again. Not as burden, but as structure. In the deepest hours of night, when no lamps remain and even dreams feel weightless, the world is not absent of life. It is simply holding it differently. Like something placed carefully into still water, not lost, only suspended. The river passes through this suspended world without effort. It does not remember each village it touches in a way that can be spoken. But it carries their traces in another sense, in the way its banks are shaped, in the way fields exist beside it, in the way human life learned to settle near its path instead of against it. Everything here is downstream from something else. Everything arrives already connected. And so even silence feels shared. Even darkness feels communal. Even rest feels like part of a larger, unseen movement. If there is a kind of truth held in this place, it is not written in monuments or spoken in loud declarations. It is written in repetition. In return. In the steady understanding that life does not need to change quickly to remain alive. It only needs to continue. Softly. Patiently. Without interruption. Far beyond the sleeping village, the river keeps moving through lands that are not visible in the night. It does not rush toward them. It is already there, already passing through them, already becoming part of whatever comes next. And in this way, it never truly ends anywhere. Not at the edge of a field. Not at the edge of a village. Not at the edge of a lifetime. It simply continues, as it always has, into places that will also one day become quiet and familiar. Back in the village, nothing announces the passing of time now. There are no clocks. No markers. Only the gradual shift from deep night toward the faintest suggestion that morning will eventually return. And it will return the same way it always has. Not as something new, but as something remembered. The first light will touch the river. Then the fields. Then the homes. And the cycle will unfold again, unchanged in its essence, even as every detail is slightly different. That is the nature of this world beside the Nile. It does not preserve life by freezing it. It preserves it by repeating it. By allowing it to flow forward in forms that never quite stay the same, yet never truly disappear. And so, in the final quiet beyond thought, there is only this. A river moving through darkness. A land shaped by its passage. A village resting in its rhythm. And time itself, no longer felt as something that ends. But only as something that continues. Softly. Endlessly. Without needing to be seen to remain real. In the deepest layers of night, where even the idea of later and before begins to lose meaning, the world of the village beside the Nile rests in a kind of settled continuity. Not an ending. Not a beginning. But something in between those ideas, something that holds both at once, without tension. The river continues through it all. It does not mark time the way human minds do. It does not count days or measure years in a way that separates one from another. Instead, it moves in a single long breath, as if all of history is happening inside one continuous motion of water. Far upstream, rains fall in lands that feel distant even in imagination. Those waters gather, slowly becoming part of something larger. They do not arrive as strangers. They become part of the same system the moment they begin to move. By the time they pass the village, they are no longer new. They are already ancient in their continuity. Already part of something that has no memory of a beginning. And yet, life along its banks is built entirely around this movement. The village sleeps, but it is not separated from the river even in sleep. The homes are quiet, but they are not disconnected from the fields. The fields are still, but they are not detached from the seasons. Everything here is part of a single arrangement that stretches across generations so long that no one person ever sees its full shape. Only fragments of it. Only pieces. Only lived experience repeated many times over. Inside the sleeping homes, bodies rest in familiar positions. Not arranged with intention, but shaped by habit. A hand resting near the edge of a mat. A child curled close to warmth. An elder lying still with the quiet ease of someone who has known many cycles of day and night. Sleep here is not a departure from life. It is part of its rhythm. A pause that allows return. Outside, the air cools further as the night deepens toward its quietest point. The land releases the warmth it has held throughout the day, giving it back slowly to the darkness. Nothing is abrupt. Nothing is sudden. Even change here behaves like patience. The fields, though invisible in darkness, remain present in structure. Rows of crops lie dormant but not lifeless. The soil beneath them holds moisture, memory, and preparation for what will come next. Every field is a kind of quiet promise. Not spoken. Not written. But repeated through action again and again. The river continues beside them all. It does not sleep. It does not pause. It does not reflect on its journey. It simply moves. And in that movement, it gathers everything into itself without distinction. Silt from distant mountains. Water from unseen rains. The remnants of countless banks it has shaped and reshaped over time. Even time itself feels carried within it here. Not as a straight line, but as accumulation. Layers upon layers of passing moments that never fully leave. The village, in its simplicity, exists within this accumulation. Each generation builds upon the patterns of the one before it. Not in construction alone, but in understanding. How to plant. How to harvest. How to guide water through soil. How to read the sky for changes in season. How to live without separating survival from rhythm. Nothing here is invented anew in isolation. Everything is inherited. Everything is adjusted slightly. Everything continues. Even what appears to change is still part of repetition at a deeper level. A flood arrives and recedes. But it is not one flood. It is all floods. A harvest comes and is gathered. But it is not one harvest. It is all harvests. A child grows into adulthood. But it is not one life unfolding alone. It is the continuation of many lives that came before. And so, time here does not feel like progress in the modern sense. It feels like circulation. Like water returning to itself through different paths. As the night approaches its quietest depth, even sound becomes rare. A distant movement of wind through reeds. A soft shift of water along the riverbank. The faint settling of earth cooling fully after the day. These are not interruptions. They are reminders that nothing is ever fully still, even when it appears to be. Stillness here is only another form of motion too slow to notice easily. And within that stillness, the village remains held in its place beside the river. Not fragile. Not temporary in the way modern ideas of time might suggest. But continuous in a different sense. Like something woven into the landscape itself. The Nile carries this continuity forward without effort. It does not remember each moment in detail. It does not forget them either. It simply becomes them as it moves. And so everything that exists beside it becomes part of that same flow. Homes, fields, hands that work the soil, eyes that watch the sky, lives that begin, unfold, and eventually rest. All of it enters the river in one way or another. Not physically always, but in pattern, in rhythm, in presence. And when morning eventually returns, as it always does, without exception, it will not feel like a break from what came before. It will feel like the next gentle turning of something that never truly stopped. Light will touch the river first, then the fields, then the village, and life will resume its quiet motion again. Not because it ended, but because it continued, and continues still, and will continue, as long as water flows, as long as soil receives it, as long as hands remember how to work the land, and as long as the rhythm of river and sky remains unbroken. In that long, soft understanding, there is no final moment. Only the endless return of ordinary life. Carried forward. Quietly. Steadily. Without end. In the quiet before dawn, when even the idea of time feels distant, the world beside the Nile rests in a stillness that is not empty, but complete. The village is asleep. Not in a fragile way, but in a way that feels practiced, like something learned over countless generations. Sleep here is not an escape from life. It is part of it. A necessary folding inward, like the land itself resting after a long day of receiving sun, labor, and water. The river does not rest. It never has. It moves through night as easily as it moves through day, carrying the weight of everything that has passed through its path. Not in memory the way humans understand memory, but in continuation. In flow. In unbroken presence. Upstream, unseen rains still exist in distant lands. They do not feel connected to this village, and yet they are. They always have been. Every drop of water that arrives here has already lived another life somewhere else before becoming part of this one. And so the Nile becomes something larger than geography. It becomes connection itself. A long thread of water linking places that never meet directly, yet still belong to each other through movement alone. Along its banks, the fields remain dark and quiet. But they are not lifeless. Beneath the surface of the soil, something is always waiting. Seeds resting. Moisture settling. The memory of past harvests embedded in the earth like a quiet instruction for what comes next. Nothing in this landscape is ever truly erased. It is only layered. Rewritten gently by time, without removing what came before. The village, too, exists in layers like this. A home stands where another once stood. A path follows the same curve as paths before it. A life begins in a place where many lives have already passed through. And yet everything feels current, present, immediate to those living it. Because in this world, time does not feel like something moving away. It feels like something circling back. Inside the sleeping homes, there is a softness in the air. The kind of stillness that belongs only to deep night. Bodies rest without awareness of the larger patterns they are a part of. A child sleeps with the same ease as an elder. A worker rests with the same quiet as someone who has never touched the fields. In sleep, all roles become equal again. Outside, the Nile continues its slow passage. If one could listen closely enough, beneath the silence of the land, there is always the faint suggestion of movement. Water against stone. Current against bank. A steady continuation that never demands attention, yet never stops existing. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It simply remains. The sky above is wide and unchanging in its vastness. Stars appear as they always do, without urgency, without pattern that can be fully understood from below. They are distant witnesses to cycles that repeat on Earth long after individual lives have ended. And still, nothing feels final. Even endings here feel like pauses rather than conclusions. Because the village will wake again. The fields will be walked again. The river will reflect morning light again. And the same gestures will return, slightly changed, yet fundamentally familiar. Hands will touch soil. Water will move through channels. Bread will be shaped. Tools will be lifted and set down. Not because the past demands repetition, but because life itself here is built on rhythm rather than rupture. In that rhythm, nothing is ever truly lost. It is only transformed, carried forward, folded into what comes next. The Nile understands this without needing to think about it. It is the embodiment of continuity. A long, patient movement that does not seek arrival, only passage. And so, as the deepest part of night slowly begins to loosen into the first suggestion of dawn, there is no dramatic shift in the world. Only a quiet turning. A soft reappearance of light at the edge of the horizon. Not as a beginning, but as return. And in that return, the village will once again become part of the same endless pattern it has always been part of. A pattern that does not end. Only continues. Softly. Steadily. Without ever needing to announce itself. And somewhere within that continuity, everything that ever happened beside the river remains present in the only way it ever has, not as story. Not as memory. But as flow.